this is to be a celebration of life. Or in other words, we're going to talk about Rob and who he was and what he did and how happy he made a lot of us. This is an upbeat event, and I would hope that all of you would approach it that way. So let me start now, and we'll go forward, and hopefully it won't be too long, but I think it will be enjoyable. So when I think about my son's life, I can't help but feel that from the very beginning, the forces of nature somehow knew that his life would be short and wanted us to cram in as much as possible into that short time. Now, as many of you know, Rob was adopted at birth by my former spouse, Jean, and me, December 1st, 1988, his birthday. It was a Thursday when we got the call from the adoption agency in San Antonio, Texas, letting us know that Rob's birth mom had given birth to a healthy baby boy and that we should get there as soon as possible. Knowing this was imminent, we had gotten ourselves prepared, and we had a condominium, and we actually had our bags packed, so we were out the door and arrived in San Antonio on Saturday. That was the best we could do with the flights. And arrangements had been made for us to meet Rob's birth mom at the hospital that afternoon. So around 3 o'clock, if I recall the time correctly, we met his birth mom, and within a few minutes, they wheeled in our new son from the nursery. We greeted him for the first time, and you can only imagine the joy that filled our hearts. Eventually, our time was up, and the nurse returned Robbie to the nursery. We thanked his birth mom for a wonderful gift she had given us and left. We had been asked to meet at the adoption agency at 6 p.m. to sign some papers. As you can imagine, these processes are, like so many processes, legal processes, are very paper heavy. So Jean and I got there, and when we got there, the door was locked. And so we began to worry, maybe something had gone on, maybe there were complications and so on and so forth. But we decided that we would just stay in the car for half an hour, whatever it took, and wait for the adoption agent to show up. Eventually, about 15 minutes later, a car pulled in. The adoption agent got out, took a large object out of the back seat of the car and went in, and of course Jean and I followed. When we got in there, we looked at her and looked at her desk, and there on her desk was Rob in a baby carrier. So she explained that the hospital had decided that Rob was healthy enough to be discharged, and so she decided that she would give us a big surprise. Surprise it was, a wonderful surprise. But I must admit, being a planning type who followed my father's mantra, plan your work and work your plan, I was a little taken aback, and I immediately began to put my plan B together to handle this. Now, if Rob could have talked, Rob was not much of a planner, and he was much more spontaneous than I ever was. And I expect that if he could have talked, he would have said, "Come on, Dad, just let's go." So we finished the formalities and went out for the first time, buckled in a baby carrier into the car's back seat, a daunting task, at least back in those days. And Jean and I and Rob drove back to the condominium. I left them off, and I headed out to what is the biggest box store I have ever seen. I mean, it's hard to imagine this place, but it was cavernous, and it had racks and shelves that went up to a very, very high ceiling and aisles all over the place. And, you know, I frankly felt lost. And so I would wander the aisles and I would see a lot of young mothers and I would go up to them and ask them for advice, what's the best formula? Where can I find a crib? What are the best diapers? And eventually I cobbled together enough to get us at least through that night, and checked out and headed back for the condominium for our first night together. So Rob began life in a slightly chaotic rush, a rush to get out of the hospital, to get out of Texas, to get on with his life. A rush that would lay a pattern for much of his life, making it at times difficult, but always interesting and exciting. Rob had a very warm childhood. The company I worked for in those days was like a big family, and the community gravitated around Rob. We had a wonderful Danish au pair with the wonderful warmth that only the Danes have. And as he began to walk, Jean and I would take him to Valley Forge Park, which was not far from where we lived in Pennsylvania, with our dogs, and he there was pretty much free to do what he wanted. I mean, you can't really, it's just all space. I would spend many weekend days in our basement playroom with him. And our relationship would continue to grow regardless of moves and other obstacles of life. He and I became the best of friends, in addition to being father and son. As Rob grew from infancy into childhood, his life became filled with adventures. His mom, Jean, bought a horse farm, and Rob became a pretty good equestrian. From his early years, tennis became his thing. I have many happy memories of Rob's tennis tournaments. And there weren't many US tennis opens that is, that didn't find us sitting in my company's corporate box. Rob was ahead of his time when it came to gaming. He would come to my office, and one of our technical people would set him up on a computer with the then current, albeit still primitive, games. I remember one of his friends once saying, "Rob lives for gaming." If Rob had been born 20 years later, he would have been a force to be reckoned with in the gaming world. Boating was my thing, and he was my first mate from the time he was 5 or 6. We would go to our boat in the Chesapeake Bay and spend the weekend. In addition to trying out his hand at fishing, he loved going to the nearby indoor arcade and the local crab restaurant. I honestly don't think that Rob was so enamored with fishing or eating crabs, but he loved to watch me cringe as I put night crawlers on hooks, or watch me struggle to try to break into a crab shell at the crab restaurant. He would laugh and smile and thought it was hilarious. We also had our share of excitement when boating. How many of you have ever driven abreast of a tornado about 50 to 100 feet to your right? Anybody? Don't think so. We did. After going through a really, really bad storm on the bay, we tied the boat up, and as we're driving down the road, here comes this tornado across the field, and 50, 100 feet at the most away from us. And I just stopped and let it get past us. Over the years, Rob got to know some of my friends. Mike and Christine, who live in Washington, D.C., are here, and a couple of times their daughters babysat Rob when Jean and I were in Washington. One person who over the years developed an adult relationship with Rob was Phil England, my former boss in the Air Force. He made a short video about Rob since he couldn't be here due to health reasons. So here's Phil.
Hello, I'm Phil England, friend of Hendry since the Air Force, and I wanted to share a few thoughts about Rob Hendry. If during this I get a little emotional, I wanted you to understand that as you get older, the shadows are lengthening, and you become aware of the frailty of life. And that old Japanese saying, which my father used to love, that duty has the weight of a mountain and life has the weight of a feather. And as I approach my 78th year, I understand what that means. So I apologize if I do get slightly emotional. It's just my age catching up with me. And I'm walking here in California, where I'm doing a sabbatical, where Robbie lived, actually. And I was planning to visit Robbie at some point because I have been a friend of Robbie through his mother, Jean, his father, Andy, and his stepmother, Mary, ever since he was a kid. It's hard for me to really say exactly what I'd like to say about Rob, because I thought so much of him. I would often end conversations with Andy by saying, how is Robbie today? Give him a special hello. And so what I want to say is this, I guess. I thought Robbie was a wonderful person. I thought he was smart. I always knew there was a lot of thinking going on behind those eyes. I think where Robbie is, his soul is surrounded by perfect love. So in a way, I don't worry about Robbie. I worry about us and our memory of Robbie. And I would never want that memory to be diluted. It's a sweet memory, a wonderful memory. He was always a pleasure to talk to. He was not judgmental. He was very easy to talk to. He always had an optimistic view of life. And I think that anyone who ever interacted with Robbie appreciated him as a human being and as a man. Robbie grew into a splendid young man. He thought of life as a journey, as an adventure, to be lived, to be absorbed. And I think that all of us who knew him are better for knowing him. And frankly, it may sound presumptuous, but I think the world is a little better for Robbie having been in it for a brief period of time. Once I got a call in my New York office from a gentleman who was thinking of hiring Robbie, and he asked me what I thought of Robbie. And I said that Robbie is I think I used the word splendid young man. He will never disappoint with respect to any trust that is granted. He will never squander any confidence shown in him. And you will always be gratified because he will attack any project assigned with diligence and intelligence. I think that there is no greater thing that I can say about Robbie was that I'm a better person because I knew him. I think Andy is a better father because he was his son. I think Jean and Mary are better people because they knew Robbie. I miss him, and I know that Robbie if he had lived longer, would have been a wonderful person. Finally, there's one thing, because I'm with my grandkids, there's one thing I want to say. I'm told that when Robbie had to face the ultimate fact of life at New York Hospital, he did it with courage, with dignity, and with serenity. I absolutely believe that to be the case because it fits the pattern of Robbie's life. Courage, dignity, and serenity. That was Robbie as a boy, as a young man, and as the man that I knew. Thank you.
And in case some of you didn't notice it, Phil is a true North Carolinian, born here, went to UNC Law School and undergraduate. So in a way, it's too bad Phil couldn't be here in person, which he refers to as going home, but I'm so glad he did that video. So Rob attended prep school in New Jersey, then the O'Neill School here, and 2 years at Saddlebrook Tennis Academy near Tampa. Rob was growing into a good amateur tennis player until an unfortunate hip industry while he was at Saddlebrook brought an end to that. There are hip injuries when you're young that they really can't do anything about. Luckily, as you get older, you grow out of them, but he was unfortunately the victim of that. As a teenager and young man, Rob was adventuresome. He became a Life Scout in Troop 1 here in Southern Pines before leaving for Saddlebrook. And I have many fond memories of our camping trips with Troop 1, with one exception. And that was the camping trip where we got into camp late and Rob would have none of not having a fire, so he decided that he was going to chop a downed tree and get sufficient kindling. And unfortunately, he didn't get the kindling, he got his knee. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, we had to summon the park ranger, and Mike will remember this because Mike and I the next day went in and brought the equipment out, but we had to summon the park ranger to get us out. But he was okay. What? Like a couple of pack mules, exactly. He and I would travel extensively. He's visited many parts of the world that most people never have or will. London, where he found my being attacked by pigeons in Trafalgar Square was uproarious. Paris on New Year's Eve. Venice, where I lost him in a hotel for a nerve-wracking hour. Niagara Falls, Hong Kong, and many others. He was a sturdy traveler. And Rob had many adventures, some with me and some on his own. At the ripe old age of 50, I decided that we should go skiing, and I timidly eventually got on the Green Diamonds. But by the time I did that, he was on the Black Diamonds with an instructor, and there was no stopping him. One time, he and I did a whitewater rafting trip on the Rogue River in Oregon. This is wild country, where Zane Grey wrote many of his novels about the Wild West. One morning, they were loading the boats, and I stepped into one where our backpacks had been placed, only to find Rob objecting strenuously. I eventually gave in and moved to another raft. Good thing. On the last waterfall of the trip, the raft I wanted to be in flipped the professor on top of a huge rock in the middle of the waterfall. Luckily, she was not hurt, but it took 4 hours to extract her, during which 40-passenger tourist speedboats would come from downriver up to that falls and hover and sit there and watch with great amusement the efforts to get this poor professor safely to the shore. I always told Rob that he saved my life that day. I really believe he did, and told him that he must be clairvoyant. Typical Rob, he just told me that a pretty girl was the captain of the second boat and he just wanted to be near her. But as I said, many of Rob's adventures were on his own. I am sure that I only know about a fraction of them. And when he did tell me about some, I was skeptical. I often took it to be a bit of exaggeration, until one day I learned to give him the benefit of the doubt. He told me that an ex-girlfriend who owned a small horse farm north of San Diego had begged him to come up and extract her tractor from a rattlesnake pit into which it had fallen. My initial thought was, what an exaggeration, until he later texted me several pictures showing them holding one of the rattlesnakes that they had knocked unconscious. Rob's taste for experimentation and adventure stayed with him his whole life. He dabbled at law as a paralegal for one of the country's largest law firms. He tried law enforcement with the San Diego Sheriff's Department and as an FBI intern. And at the time of his death, he had established a successful editing business and was pursuing an advanced culinary arts degree from one of the most prestigious chef schools in the country. He could write and cook. One of the assignments he had was from an author who is updating his book, who hired Rob to be the editor of it, and he sent me a few comments. This is what he said. The man's name is Bruce. Robert Hendry and I met 14 years ago in New York City, where Andy and he joined me in a hamburger place on the Upper East Side. I knew him as Robbie then. I remember him as a charming, intelligent, self-deprecating, and funny young man. Just a few months before he passed, he and his girlfriend spent a few days with us at our beach house in Anna Maria Island, Florida. That's where we learned about his culinary talents, as he cooked a terrific steak in red wine sauce dinner for us. We liked and admired Robbie very, very much. Rob was very strong-willed, and when he decided to pursue something, the odds were very high that he would succeed. But he had little interest in pursuing other people's goals. He made up his own mind and then went after it. When Rob graduated from the O'Neill School here, he headed out west to attend University of San Diego. As you can imagine, I was not crazy about this decision because of the distance, but yielded to it because I knew standing in Rob's way on something he really wanted was a bad idea. He made some good friends there who are now scattered across the globe and hopefully watching this webcast or will watch it when it's archived. One of them sent me an email which I believe captured the Rob we all knew and loved. He wrote, "He was a very bright person in both intellect and spirit. He was a great friend to me when we lived in San Diego during college and after, and he will be greatly missed. He was my first friend in the dorms at University of San Diego and was very kind to me from the start. It made me feel much more at home in a new place to meet someone like that." More recently, Anthony Reeder, who is here with us today, has been a true friend to Rob, and I've asked him to say a few words about Rob. Anthony, you can use the podium or you could use the mic, whichever you're more comfortable with. Why don't you use the mic? Okay, but I'll give you the podium too. So.
Wherever you want me. Rob and I have had a really nice relationship for, I'd say, the last 3 years. We've actually been working on Mr. Hendry's memoir together, and I'll tell you, Rob, you would think he wrote the English language, because there's rules that I swear a master's degree could not teach you. Like, he taught me more than probably any of my teachers all throughout school. Mind you, I went to LAUSD, so that's not saying much, but, you know, he did his thing. Rob was all about adventures. Every time I'd call him, he would have a different story for me, and if I recall correctly, I don't think there's ever been a phone call that lasted less than 45 minutes. we would get in depth, and a lot of conversations would start about work, and then we'll talk about work for probably 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then an hour into it, we're talking about the last 2 weeks worth of things and what we think about where the world's at, and getting a real in-depth perspective. And the other thing I could say is, through our conversations, I don't think there's anyone he admired more than his father. His father was truly his superhero, and he would explain to me that doing this project that we were doing together, he always respected his dad, but he didn't realize the impact he had on so many other people. And I think that was the thing about Rob. He also didn't understand the impact him himself had on so many other people at times. He was a very infectious person, I'd say. His personality is way beyond these years. We both shared the same sense of humor. There was probably jokes we had that only me and him would understand. And there was another word that stuck out. He never called me his friend or anything. He would say, "Hey, brother, how are you?" So it was very much family-like. So it's like losing a family member. And I'd done some research. Rob, through our conversations, talked to me a lot about Scientology because he was a devoted member. And he said, the human body doesn't really have that much impact. He's like, there's no meaning to it. It's all about energy. And we had a similar conversation when he was in the hospital. And he didn't directly tell me this, but I always know whatever Rob's saying, there's a deeper meaning. So I know what he was telling me is that he's still going to be with us. And I truly believe he's here today with us right now. And, I think he's in a better place. He was probably too pure for this world, and he was loved, and he'll be in our hearts forever.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So, despite the distance, we did everything we could to stay connected. Mary and I made frequent trips west. We had many Thanksgivings and Christmases in San Diego. Rob reciprocated by coming back here for the holidays or to just visit family and friends. And some of you who have been on those events know how frequently we did that. Sadly, COVID interrupted the regular flow of this. But even with that, we kept connected with weekly online game days. And Rob, myself, Mike Pierce, who's sitting here, Rob's uncle, and Rob and Nancy Nelson would get together and play online games for a couple of hours on the weekend, and it helped break some of the COVID isolation and kept us connected. So I'm going to ask Mike to talk a little bit. He knows Rob pretty well because of game days, but much more than that. He's known him for a number of years over holidays and things like that and family gatherings. So Mike, would you mind? Here you
go. For everybody that's out here, I'm married, oldest brother, Mike, and we live in Whiteville, North Carolina, which is about 2 hours southeast of here, heading towards Wilmington, North Carolina. So we're in close proximity to Pinehurst, so we frequently had the opportunity to come and share family get-togethers here in Pinehurst with Andy and Mary, and occasionally Rob. With Rob living on the West Coast, our interactions were basically when Rob came home, which was usually over the 4th of July, Thanksgiving, and Christmas holidays. Okay. Originally, in the early days, Rob was very reserved around us, and I think it was because he was always the youngest person at these family gatherings, and I think he was slightly intimidated by all us old folks being around. Okay. When COVID arrived on the scene, for safety matters, we decided to curtail some of our family get-togethers, and about that time, that's when Andy introduced Game Day on Zoom. Game Day was every Saturday from 2 to 5 p.m., and as Andy indicated, our players were Andy, Rob, myself, and Nancy Nelson, who lives in New York City. Okay. The games we played were Monopoly and Clue. Okay. And we had a lot of fun, and the fun was enhanced by a lot of good nature. Yeah, bantering would be a good question, good way to say that, yeah. Preferred Clue over Monopoly. And though we all occasionally won a game, more often than not, Rob won the game of Clue. So much so that I gave him the title of Clue Master. Okay. One Saturday, it was just the three amigos, Andy, Rob, and myself, and we played 2 games of Monopoly, and we switched to Clue. Now, both games, the game itself determines the player rotation. Okay. So on my home base, on my PC, via Zoom, I can see and talk with the players, and the game is actually played on an iPad. Okay. When it's your turn, the dice show up, and you press the dice. And in Monopoly, the game automatically moves your game piece, the number of spaces that was shown on the dice. In Clue, you would get some rooms would be highlighted, and these were the rooms that you were entitled to go to. The higher the dice roll, the more rooms, up to a maximum of 9. Okay. For this particular game, I was selected to go first. So I rolled the dice and selected a room, and then I looked at my hand, which had my clue cards, and then I just selected a suspect and a weapon. And I submitted that to the game, and then I got feedback of a clue card from either Andy or Rob. Okay. At that point, I have to make a decision. You have 2 options. You can either make an accusation, or you can end your turn. Well, this is the first round, and I have no idea who the suspect is and the weapon and what room, so I pass. Rob is next. He goes through the same scenario, but to my astonishment, he selects he's going to make an accusation, which astonished me and especially Andy, because Andy's patiently waiting for his turn. Okay. Well, to give you a little background, Rob only has a third of the clue cards. Okay. There's 9 rooms, 6 suspects, and 6 weapons. So statistically, what he's proposing as an accusation is really against the rule. Our normal rotation was we would go 5 or more rounds before someone had enough information to make an educated guess. Well, the game verifies that Rob won. Okay. I glance up at my PC, and there's Rob with a little smirk on his face, and he says, "Sorry, Dad." Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Obviously, that 1 round winning action solidified Rob's title as the Clue Master. Andy and I both asked him how he did it, and he refused to tell us. Even at future games and family meetings, he just wouldn't tell us. Okay. So I went online to find out just how exceptional that was, and there are several people that have won games in the first round. So, like I say, it's pretty exceptional. The game day really changed Rob, as far as I was concerned. Like I said before, in our meetings in the early days, he was very reserved. Now he was very outspoken. I think part of that had to do, he was playing with 3 retirees every Saturday. He got used to hanging around with older people. So when we had our meetings then, he was very outgoing. He had a lot of interesting stories. He entered into our conversations. And I think one of the interesting things is he had a lot of things that happened to him in San Diego, and he would tell us those stories. And let's see what I was going to say. But at any rate, we found Rob to be fun to be around, very likable, a really good friend, and a very intelligent young man. And we surely will miss him. He was taken from us very, very early in his life. I went on the Bulls funeral website and read all the wonderful comments and the comments that people made to Andy and Mary. And I'm amazed that at least 23 trees are going to be planted in Rob's name. Your being here today represents that we all miss Rob and that we will remember to continue in our thoughts and prayers. And I especially will miss having the opportunity to play with Rob again, the Clue Master, in the future. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mike. So eventually Rob graduated from Arizona State University at the top of his class, I might add, with a major in criminal justice and a minor in culinary arts. I was lucky during Rob's West Coast years, because you can imagine being a caring parent with that much distance can be a very stressful and difficult situation, but Rob and I navigated it, but we navigated it with some help. And in the early days, when he first went to University of San Diego, a good friend of mine and lawyer, George Stoner, was his surrogate uncle. And more recently, Anthony's father, Chris Reeder, who is a lawyer, took over the role of surrogate uncle. So I'd like each of them just to come up and say a few words about their experiences with Rob. George, how about you first?
Andy did say I'm a lawyer. Have you ever heard a lawyer just say a few words? Not going to happen. My name is George Stoner. More than 3 decades ago, I had the great fortune to meet Andy Hendry. And he became like a brother to me. I think of him as my brother, and therefore I came to think of Rob as my nephew. The last time I spoke with Rob was via a Zoom conference. Not like being in person, and not part of our lexicon necessarily 4 years ago, but not bad. And it was a great conversation. I'm so glad I had it. It was first with Andy and I, and then Andy was sitting at his desk, and I saw Rob appear. It really delighted me. Rob was literally at Andy's side. And what I observed many times in life, but also this last time that I spoke to them together, that Rob was literally and figuratively also at Andy's back. They told me of a book that Andy was writing with Rob's help. I got to tell you, what I saw in that Zoom conference, side by side, was a son very, very proud of his father, and a father very, very proud of his son. And I'll hold on to that picture of them together forever. What I also observed was Rob standing ready to harvest a lifetime of his dad's experiences, to put it down in writing for him. Rob was eager and excited. You could see that eagerness and excitement in him to help. And to me, that was vintage Rob. What was implicit to me is that Rob didn't say it, but I knew that Rob was thinking, I'm going to learn a lot from doing this. And Rob was, in my experience, always, always eager to learn more in life. He recognized there's a lot to learn, and that too was vintage Rob. So, over his lifetime, from when he was young, I had many opportunities to talk with Rob. Many of them were just him and me. Lots of them were conversations about him from his dad. Some conversations with him about his dad. And a lot of conversations together that included Rob with Andy. And where we would have these conversations in New York, North Carolina, the Jersey Shore, and California, as Andy said, where I once lived when Rob was in school there. And those conversations were ones where Rob was always the grown-up in those conversations. Now, one of those times was 15 years ago to this day. When I look back upon it, it was actually October 23, tomorrow, 15 years ago, in 2007, when fires and the Santa Ana winds swept across Southern California and required the students at the University of San Diego to evacuate. I invited Rob and his friends, if he wanted, and of course he brought them, to come live with me while they were evacuated in Los Angeles, which he did. He brought his friends. What I saw during that visit, which I will always treasure, again in Rob, was just some of his characteristics. Immense gratitude. An ability to share. Let's face it, Rob had a lot of privileges in life. He shared them. From my vantage point, he always shared them quietly. Not everybody does that. His sense of humor, it was terrific, regardless of what stresses he was feeling. His hopes. Rob was always, in my interactions with him, full of hope. His respect. He treated me with respect at times when I didn't deserve it. And his desire to work hard. He had a strong work ethic. But life throws us curves. Some we duck. Sometimes we can hit him out of the park. Sometimes we swing and miss. But sometimes they just hit us hard and they keep coming. At Rob's core was a wonderful soul. But from a distance, and sometimes up close, I watched those curves thrown to Rob in life. I had the chance to talk with him about his choices throughout. And I was blessed to witness Rob savor the happy moments. He had lots of them, and I'm so glad I witnessed them. I saw what Rob was. I saw what he was trying to become. And hope was pervasive because of all the promise that resided in his character. It always seemed that Rob was, to me at least, that Rob was searching for that certain equilibrium in life that would bring him peace. And that's what I wished most for Rob. That conversation with Rob and Andy, my last conversation with him, I thought that for that moment, he clearly had succeeded in doing so. It was tangibly visible to me when I last spoke with him. And it's my understanding at the end of his life here, I trust he was able to treasure that peace. Those who loved him were there for him, and I'm sure that helped make that possible. That was a precious time, and while painful, a precious memory. Now, it's my faith that the peace that I observed is and will remain forever in Rob's living soul. And his memories will live perpetually. Regardless of one's faith, though, that we have those treasured memories and that we know that when they're recalled by us, will provide moments of inspiration, always rooted in the lives of those we have loved and lost. In this case, Rob. And that's why I thank Mary and Andy and all of you for the opportunity to share these memories. It's been a very important time for me to reflect, and I know I'm going to think of Rob always. Now, there was a popular song written in 1972 by then a 30-something songwriter named Johnny Nash. It's a song that Johnny Nash said is about hope and about the courage of persons who have experienced and overcome adversity in life. Its title is I Can See Clearly Now. So in closing, I'd like to share, with only a little paraphrasing, the lyrics from that song. The lyrics I'm about to read fit my hopes and thoughts about Rob today. And the words from the song that I'm going to read are words that I really can feel Rob speaking to us today from where he is. So let me read these words. I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all the obstacles that were in my way. Gone now are the dark clouds that had me blind. Oh yes, I am happy now. The pain is gone. All the bad feelings have disappeared. Here, where he is today, is the rainbow I've always wished for. The song goes on to speak to us, I think, also in words that I think Rob would also say to us today. And those words are, and it happens to be that kind of day, look all around. There's nothing but blue skies. Look straight ahead. There's nothing but blue skies. So, I think there are blue skies ahead for us here who loved Rob, made more vivid by the memories we have of him. And that's what I'm sure Rob would wish for those he loved. Now it's our job to look at the future more clearly and to remember the joys he brought to us and left with us. And finally, because I can feel him too, I can feel him, and you're going to be me for a second. George, I am so glad you didn't try to sing that song.
Thanks very much. So, as I said, I was blessed to have George there out on the West Coast kind of doing my job for me and seeing that Rob was okay. But as George moved on, I was also equally blessed by a new person coming into Rob's life, who there too was his surrogate uncle. And that's Chris Reeder. And Chris, would you mind making some comments, please?
Hi, I'm Chris Reeder. Could I be a cousin instead of an uncle? Anyway, an older cousin, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. You got to take the deal when you can get it. I would just like to leave you with a concept, and the concept is life is about quality, not quantity. Rob's life was about quality, and he had quality. I've never met a smarter, really happy person. Rob was amazingly creative, and he was amazingly smart, and he was amazingly diligent. And to prove that to you, because I'm a trial lawyer, so I feel like I have to prove everything I say, I'm going to tell you the story about when I first met Rob. I was the head of the real estate department of a national law firm, and one of the executive committee came to me and he says, we have this little tiny real estate thing that normally we'd give to an associate, but you got to handle it because the client is the former general counsel of Colgate-Palmolive, and so you have to do it yourself. And I said, okay, fine. So I had about a 5-minute conversation with Andy, and we got to know each other and things like that. And I said, okay, fine, this is not going to be a problem. So I called Rob up. Rob proceeded then to interview me for about an hour about all my relevant experience. Then, after he deemed that I was sufficiently qualified to handle the situation, he then gave me his legal theories on the case in what could fill a hornbook. And Rob was like that. He was so diligent. He was so smart. And the other part about Rob is he was so creative. His writing skills were unbelievable. They really were. And he asked me one time, he's like, do you think I should go to law school? And I said, no, Rob, I don't think you should go to law school. He said, why? I said, you write too well to be a lawyer. You really do. And it was just amazing to see Rob progress throughout the years. But the one thing that was always constant with Rob, it was his love for his dad. He loved his dad more than anything. Everything he did was to please his dad. He loved his dad, and his dad loved him in return. And it was such a beautiful father and son relationship. It really was. They might have been across country, and especially during COVID, but their bond was unbelievable. And I think that's a testimony both to Andy and to Rob, because they really loved each other. They really did. So the other thing that I noticed about Rob that was interesting is Rob was absolutely tenacious. If he thought something was the case, you couldn't tell him it wasn't the case, because not only would he tell you you were wrong, he would go prove you were wrong by whatever means and however long it took. And I love that. And, you know, people that call it stubborn, I'm Irish, so that's actually a compliment. And I think Rob got every bit of that Irish stubbornness from his dad. So he was just an incredible person. Now, after we had kind of the COVID lockdown, and Andy and Rob and Anthony Andy was remote, but Anthony and Rob would work out of my office. And I told Anthony and Rob, I said, hey guys, great. I'm glad you're working in the office, because during COVID, I had a second conference room built. You know, it's perfect for you guys. Well, I walked into the office for the first day, and they didn't take the second conference room. They took the main conference room. So everybody else got the secondary conference room, which was fine. Then the one thing I want to say about Rob, too, and this is a huge compliment, he is the only one who's ever worked out of my office that did not complain about the Wi-Fi. Everybody complains about the Wi-Fi. I've had to tell everybody we have the highest plan Spectrum offers at all. Rob never, ever complained about the Wi-Fi. And he was so nice to have in the office. It was such a positive presence. It was so nice in a law office to have something creative going on, you know, because so much of what we do is so destructive. It was so nice to have something creative going on. But I remember walking down the hallway one day and hearing this screaming coming out of the conference room. And then I realized it was Rob, Anthony, and Andy on a Zoom call about the book. And afterwards I said, guys, what was going on? And it was like, well, we disagreed about a sentence. And I said, well, okay, I'll stay out of that. That looked like an Irish bar fight. And I remember one day Rob came into the office, and just unannounced, he brought lunch for everybody. And I mean, he didn't order it. He brought it in for everybody and gave the whole office lunch, which was greatly appreciated. And then I remember he took a trip to Northern California in 2021, and he brought the office manager back a bottle of wine, and it was so nice. And the office manager really appreciated it, because, you know, anyone who knows a law office knows that the office manager is the most hated person in the office. And he was so happy. And then I said, Rob, that was so nice of you to give Thomas the wine. He's like, yeah, he's great, and you know what? He makes sure I get paid. So, because I guess Andy had them sending him the timesheets. But that was Rob, and Rob lived a really quality life. He had fun. You know, I saw him in a lot of situations where he was having a great time. He was smart. His work was incredible, and his work will last. There's a book that's going to be a lasting legacy to Rob. So the last comment I'm going to leave you with, to try to prove my point to you, which I hope I've done, that life is about quality, not quantity, is I want to give you some names. The first name I want to give you is Princess Di. The second name I want to give you is Jim Morrison. The third name I want to give you is Jimi Hendrix. The last name I want to give you, which I don't believe, but Rob is making me say it, is Nipsey Hussle. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, you know, I could go on all night talking about my wonderful son and all the joy he brought me during his short 33 years. You know, and as Chris says, it's about quality, and he had a very high quality life, and I think he brought a lot of joy to the people around him. I know he brought a lot of joy to me, and hopefully we brought joy to him. He was smart, funny, strong, adventuresome, and most of all, loving. I love him dearly and I miss him greatly, but I know he is in a good place and will have an existence even better than the one he had with me. And I know that he would want me to move forward and be the best person I can be for as long as I am allowed to have life on this earth. That will be my challenge for the rest of my life. So my dear son Rob, be happy and soar. Thank you for the wonderful 33 years you gave me as a son and friend. I will try to be the best person you would want me to be. I love you, and I know you love me, and that will give me the strength I need to carry on. So everyone, thank you for being here, and those who are watching this in the live stream, thank you for watching it and for all the love and support we've gotten over the last tough 4 weeks. I want to end this with a short video sent to me by the musician, son and daughter-in-law of Ralph and Jan DeFore, who are here with us. And thank you very much. Can you play that?
Hello. I'm Drew DeFore. This is my wife, Colleen Kincurin. We didn't know Robert, but Andy and Mary are close friends of ours, and two of the kindest, most generous people we've ever met. So this song is for them and anybody else that might benefit from it in this time of grief. I know you gotta mourn, you gotta get it all out. You gotta cry your tears. But hopefully after all the memories and all the rituals and some hugs, some friends, some good food, some drink, you're going to have to make that decision we all make just about every day. Are you going to let the pain and suffering of life overwhelm you? Or make the decision to appreciate all the good things you still have and just choose to smile.
Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by.
If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you.
Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near.
That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use in crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. Love you guys.
Please enjoy the evening, and remember Rob, that's what Rob would want you to do, and he's here with us, so just let's have a good evening. Thank you very much.